Hello vinyl community, I'm back with another video. As you can tell from the title down below, I'm going to be talking about library music, but I want this video to explain or be a bit of a primer for folks who don't know what library music is. But I also have three drivers for this video today, and I want to talk about those today. But let's just get into it.
Top row here, that's what's known as library music. It's non-commercial music made for use in film and television. A good example will be dramatic backgrounds, classic KPM record. So half these tunes were used in a film called Deep Throat, and at the same time, Approaching Menace, track 3, is the theme to Mastermind.
If you'd watch an advertisement, a TV program, or a film, the chances are it'll be accompanied by a piece of music. That music may have been specifically commissioned, but as budgets grow tighter, rather than going tailor-made, more and more producers are turning to ready-made music from production libraries. Although cheap, for a long time production music was regarded as somewhat second-rate. But as demand grows, the quality is rising rapidly.
Everybody has heard library music. I don't care what country you're from. Library music is everywhere. It's used in television productions, it's used in movie productions, it's used in radio productions. The thing is it's not typically for sale domestically. Now, there's a couple of famous examples which I think most of you in North America and maybe the UK know. So let's start out with this one. So you recognize that? Yeah, that came from this particular library record by Czech Trombe. Very interesting album. And I want to give you another sample. Have you heard this one before? So yeah, if you're a football fan, you've probably heard this. The record that this particular track is on is way too expensive, out of my price range. But one of the drivers today for doing this is this fine record here. That particular track is on this record, and this is a soundtrack to the documentary, the library music film, done by an artist by the name of Sean Lee, who is in the band Young Gun Silver Fox, and this is AM Waves. So AM Waves is exactly at the perfect description for this particular album. This is Sean Lee here. So if you're a fan of 70s AM radio, think like the Doobie Brothers or the Commodores. These guys do a really good job at capturing the sound. Just to give you a sampling of what this album is like, here you go.
And I sit here behind the wheel, watching embers turn red, with a sense of deja vu that follows everywhere, everywhere now it's you.
Aside from my video, which I can only touch the surface of, I have not seen this film. Supposedly it's on Facebook, or maybe it is. I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know. Maybe one of you guys that's on Facebook, you guys can tell me. But this is a good overview. This has some wonderful tracks on it. Now, library music, the albums are very hit and miss. And are these going to be like the best albums ever? No, they're not. There's probably going to be 5 or 6 good cuts, if that, maybe 1 or 2. But this gives a nice sampling. So you see the artists here on the sticker. Yeah, these artists chose the cuts for this particular album, and I can't recommend it enough. But the second reason why I'm doing this video today is there's a record label called DeWulf Records that is re-releasing KPM Records, which is one of the most famous library record labels out of the UK. Now, some of these, if it has a famous track on it, these albums go for hundreds of dollars. And as you can tell from the library music film clip, which I'll include a link down below, they weren't available for commercial release. I mean, they were given to radio stations, television stations, and film studios that were operating off of a budget. So, you know, if you didn't have the money to cut a score, then you would use a record like this, and you know, you would get a license and you would put the tracks on. So what's interesting is they have descriptions of, you know, what each track sounds like. And DeWulf has put out 8 or 9 KPM albums. There's another one. Now KPM has these simple green covers, that's it. But the last reason, when I was checking those albums out, a record that I never thought would be possible was this one here, Spyder Jazz. And you're probably wondering what Spyder Jazz is. Well, think The Amazing Spider-Man. They couldn't even use the name for legal reasons. This comes from Trunk Records, or Johnny Trunk. And Johnny Trunk is a record collector just like us, and what I incorporated in the intro, the gentleman with the glasses is Johnny Trunk, and he has his own record label, and he does wonderful reissues. I didn't think an album like this was possible. I was a fan of the cartoon in the 60s. The animation was really, really cheap, really low budget. When they got to the second season, they just cut doing original music, and they used stuff from the KPM label. And this uses, you know, some of the best cuts from the KPM records. And I never thought I would ever see this, but this is just classic. So I want to give you a couple of tracks off this particular record just so you can get a sample of what it's like. So it's a nice mixture of jazz, psychedelic rock, and it matches the animation, because when they got to the second or third seasons of this cartoon, the backgrounds were very psychedelic. And there's this wonderful track called Hellraisers by Sid Dale, where the guitars are extra crunchy. There's this wonderful sax solo, just wonderful jazz, funk, rock fusion. So here you go, check this one out. So another famous label in the UK, library music label, is DeWulf, and Music DeWulf. And they had very simple covers too, for the most part. This is Underlay. This is an album which is far from perfect. In fact, the first side of this album I'm not a fan of. It's too light and fluffy. For those of you that know the 60s game show or variety show Laugh-In, the music is kind of like that on the first side, and I'm not a fan of that music. But the second side is just wonderful. And yeah, I'm going to play you Underlay number 3 by Czech Trombe. Same one from Monty Python. So here you go. here's an original KPM. Now, again, some of these you can find really cheaply through Discogs, but again, if it had like a famous track on it, then yeah, it's like hundreds of dollars. This one has a notable short track on it that I think some of you may recognize, you know, if you were alive in the 80s or the 70s. So listen to this and let me know if you know what it is. Alright, so there's a lot of UK labels. Another famous one is Brut On Music. They had some interesting covers. I mean, still very basic in its design. This one is from one of my favorite library music composers, Brian Bennett. And this is classical, so if you're not a classical fan, you can just skip forward a couple minutes. But I do want to play a track off of this one. Brut On Music is interesting because, yeah, it ran the gambit of styles. It was actually purchased by Michael Jackson in 1982. True fact. But here you go. Here's Brian Bennett's Renaissance. Yeah, not to keep the video going too long, another famous label, Be With, is actually doing reissues of this one. Not this particular record. This is Themes, this is Things to Come. This is a wonderful synth rock type album, more on the ambient side. You can find this one relatively cheap, I want to say. Very great music, at least for me personally. Now Themes, some of their albums go for hundreds of dollars, but here's a couple of samples from this particular record here. Now I gotta say, France, Germany, the UK, even the United States had their own labels. There is a wonderful reissue label out of Italy called Schema, and they're doing some of their reissues. This is done by Piero Ulimani, and this is just a wonderful record too. Again, it's not a perfect album by any means, but there's some really killer cuts on here, and you can kind of tell why, you know, hip-hop artists like to choose samples from some of these very rare records because they have such great drum tracks. There's great beats to a lot of the stuff. So here's a couple of cuts off this particular album. Alright guys, so that's an overview of library music for you, and a small sampling of what I have in my collection. I didn't want this to go too long because I don't know what kind of interest there's going to be in this. But anyway, you know, library music is still being made today. There's some wonderful online services, even from the major labels. Like here I'm showing you EMI. And if you're a YouTuber and you don't want to use the YouTube music library because, you know, some of the tracks are great, but there's a lot of stuff that, you know, isn't that great, you can go to a subscription service called Epidemic Sounds. There's also Storyblocks. Here on Epidemic Sounds, I think you pay like $15 a month and you can download as many tracks as you want, and you can use them on YouTube, royalty free. So anyway, are you guys a fan of library music? Do you have anything in your collection? Shoot me a comment down below, and I'll catch you next time.